afternoon, and welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly, a podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. Trying out a little new camera angle here. Hello up there. Hopefully you can see me trying to catch all this stuff in here as we deliver to you this week's podcast, which is centered around the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan that's being done in Denham Springs. Very interesting project there. Just want to remind everybody before we jump into it that you can check out these shows at www.livingstonparishnews.com/podcast. We also distribute them via most major podcast platforms. That includes Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. Please check us out in those places, on those platforms. Say it again, if you will. And thanks again for joining us. We are talking about the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. It is the feature for this past Thursday's paper. That would be Thursday, October 24th. Today is the 25th. And we're talking about sort of the process here. There's some interesting discussion in and around the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. One of the things that came out of the Great Flood of 2016 was the group called Denham Strong. Denham Strong's purpose was to try to give a little connection between the city government, city legislatures, and the people. And it was a project that was backed by FEMA because that's one of the things they were trying to do is, okay, part of building a more resilient community to natural disasters in a post-disaster world is, doing some of these things that we FEMA tell you to do. But one of the things, that you have an opportunity for in the wake of disaster is grant money, grant funding, that sort of thing. And one of the paths that FEMA explained was that you can form these groups to chase down this grant money to try to, build things, create things, change things up a little bit. And in having these public forums and these open houses for Denham Strong to discuss these kinds of things, bicycle and pedestrian access was brought up at several open houses that were done by Denham Strong in the wake of the Great Flood. And those public hearings started in 2018 for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. Now, where did the funding come from the first place, and how did this all get started? So the Capital Region Planning Commission had a grant program talking about or funding bicycle, pedestrian, increased mobility in cities. The grant was only there to help develop a master plan. It was not there, for these places in these cities. It was not there to start building roads or new bicycle paths or anything like that. So it's definitely a process, and it started there. The Denham Springs split the money with the city of Baker. And we're awarded $50,000, and which has a 10% match on the cost, and hired a firm called Gresham Smith. Smith is a engineering, architecture, and planning firm that is the lead consultant on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. Mike Sewell's kind of the face of their team. He is the one who's been running a lot of these public hearings. According to Mike, there's a lot of things that go into this. So what they did in the first hearing was they just kind of sat down with a blank slate, asked people to come in and just start marking it up. Where do you want bike paths? Where do you want pedestrian paths? What do you want them to look like? The second public hearing kind of gave people an opportunity to see what the community came up with and sort of add to it. It was also a chance for them to start discussing the fact that, okay, some of these projects that we come up with are going to cost more than others. Some of them the city can afford through their normal, capital outlay budget, for which the city of Denham Springs does not have a capital outlay budget, but what they do have is a participation in a overlay program through the state, which does state highway connectors. So if you think about it, Highway 190, right? River Road. So River Road, Florida Boulevard, Range Avenue, and Pete's Highway are all state highways. So just about almost all of the streets in Denham Springs, except for a few that run north-south in subdivisions, are technically state highway connectors. So the idea here is that by developing this plan, the city can then piggyback on any DOTD or federal projects to maybe get some of this and implement it. So there may not be any money coming out of the city of Denham Springs, or they may pay for some of the smaller projects as things come along. But that's where the funding is coming from right now. And of course, there are grants as well. It was divided into, the potential for state regional and local master plans, the original sort of, I guess you can say, 4 or 5 projects that came out. So the locals were Denham Strong, of course, in the Envision Livingston Master Plan, which was starting to come back together at that point, as you may or may not know. Just a few weeks ago, the Parish Council actually passed the Envision Livingston Master Plan. For regional, you're talking about Move 2042, which is a long-range transportation plan through the Department of Transportation and Development, the Transportation Improvement Program, which is also through the state, and then the Capital Region Planning Commission's Non-Motorized Transportation Plan. That's how they got the money. That's how Denham Springs got the money to start this process. Then statewide, the Louisiana Statewide Transportation Plan, Louisiana Statewide Bicycle and Transportation Master Plan, a Complete Streets Work Group, and a long-range bicycle map statewide. So again, they received $50,000 from that CRPC, Capital Region Planning Commission Non-Motorized Transportation Plan. That was a grant. They had a $10,000 match, and they hired Gresham Smith, Mike Sewell. So, excuse me. So the Move 2042 initiative is a big deal and has been cited several times at these bicycle and pedestrian master plans. It seems to be one of the things that they're trying to piggyback on. That's what Jeanette Clark, who is the recovery coordinator for the city of Denham Springs, said as well. What they're going to be trying to do, because what Move 2042 is, just in case you probably didn't know, it is the Department of Transportation Development's attempt to increase bicycle and pedestrian travel on or near state highways. So the idea here is that, okay, we get a plan developed, we go through these public hearings, those public hearings continue to evolve and adapt and grow this pedestrian master plan into something that the city will eventually accept or adopt. And then you go to DOTD and they say, okay, we're about to overlay this road. And you say, hey, we have a master plan that says we'd love for this road to have, a shared bike path on it. Okay, well, that fits into the scope of the project. It's also part of Move 2042. We're going to throw it in there and do it. And that's sort of the idea of this whole plan is if you have it, then you can implement it along the way by piggybacking on other projects. So that was a big deal. Now, unfortunately, some of the original, I guess you can say, ideas for major bike paths came from Range Avenue at Cockram Road to I-12, so that's basically the length of the city. Pete's Highway at Hatchell Lane to Cockram Road, that's, about half the city. River Road at Range Avenue to Florida Boulevard, again, that's basically the entire city. And Florida Boulevard from the Parish line to Jubin Road, again, that's a long path there. And, the 4 areas were mentioned several times. There are several types of bike paths that could come to any of these. We're not going to know exactly what they propose per project until the final draft comes out sometime in the next few weeks, at which point they're hoping, that would be Gresham Smith is hoping to go to the city council in November, possibly in December, to discuss adopting this master plan. But for those 4, they had to analyze what's called bike level of suitability scores, or BLOS. And, while Pete's Highway, Range Avenue, and Centerville, which wasn't mentioned there, but it was a high demand area, they all received low BLOS scores. In fact, the only 2 that received high were Florida Boulevard from the Parish line on the western side of the Parish to Jubin Road, and River Road, which runs from just north of the cemetery down to Florida Boulevard. They received high scores. So it will be interesting to see what happens with those projects. Again, some of those are very, very, very high cost projects, especially to put something like a bike path all the way down River Road, which has in sections recently been overlaid since about 2011 to now. So it's going to be interesting to see if DOTD, we're not really coming back to that area for a while. So if y'all want to do that project, you're going to have to find another way to do it. Again, that'll be something similar with Florida Boulevard, which just received a whole lot of overlay as well. So a lot of these are going to be focused in and around what kind of funding is available. As we mentioned, they're not just going to jump into this. It's not something, they're just going to throw on the budget and make it happen. It's going to take time. Ms. Clark is going to have to find some grants that are available, that kind of thing. But one of the things that she did say in an interview was that if you don't have it, then you can't put it in front of DOTD. You can't put it in front of these people that provide grants. You can't put it in front of the parish for their road stuff. You can't put it in front of the feds for their road stuff. If you don't have a plan, nobody's going to pay attention to you about it. So you had to have the plan first, then you can kind of try to find some things to go with it. Also, the Bass Pro area, River Road and Pete's Highway would have maybe some shared road paths, a bike lane or a paved shoulder for Centerville, Cockram, and Range Avenue South. Range Avenue North would have a completely separated bike lane. So designated connector streets between those roads would be bike boulevards and contain sidewalks long enough for pedestrian and bike traffic. Now, there's also another part of this. A lot of people are just talking about, bicycle plan. I got ahead of myself. A lot of people are just talking about the bicycle plan, but there is a pedestrian master plan too. And, the proposal there is to add sidewalks to a whole lot of streets in Denham Springs, and I'll call them out for you. Bass Pro Boulevard, River Road, Rushing Road, Centerville Street, Pete's Highway, Hatchell Lane, Florida Boulevard, Tate Road, Edgewood Boulevard, Veterans Boulevard, Benton Lane, Maddie Street, Oak Street, Jackson Street, and Julia Street. Now, if those don't sound familiar, a lot of them are those connector roads, which are connecting a lot of these state highways. And so what they're trying to do is go in, and this is the last part of what Ms. Clark talked about. They're trying to go in with the state and not only get overlaid roads and sidewalks, but they're also trying to improve drainage in the area. Getting subsurface drainage, getting big enough culverts, getting enough catch basins to improve drainage on these cross streets. As we all know, we've had a drainage problem in Denham Springs since the Great Flood. So when you combine all this, it's really about trying to get people mobile, finding the money for it, and then trying to, piggyback on other projects and improve things, especially drainage along the way. So we will be running some things once they give us the final map so that you, the citizens, can see it. I know this is hyper focused on Denham Springs, but some other towns, cities, even the parish itself may be interested on how they develop this and how these things go. Waiting to see what that first project will be as they jump onto, trying to piggyback on DOTD or the parish or people of that nature. Again, those four major outlets that are looking for, people are looking for new bicycle based travel. Range Avenue at Cockram Road to I-12, Pete's Highway at Hatchell Lane to Cockram Road, River Road to Range Avenue to Florida Boulevard, and Florida Boulevard from the Parish line to Jubin Road. Shared bike lanes would have bikes and automobiles on it, while, separated bike lanes, that's just what it sounds. There will be something separating those bicycle folks from people on the street. They're also looking for what's called bike boulevards. You may have seen them in other areas. In a lot of cases, it's when train tracks or train areas have been reclaimed by a city and turned into hardtops. They did it in Mandeville and Covington. There's a giant bike boulevard that connects a lot of restaurants. It brings a lot of commerce to the area. A lot of folks like to ride it. So that's going to be interesting as they pile forward. There will be no more public hearings. They had their last one at the beginning of August. There will be an announcement that the map is ready. It will become public, and then they will meet with the City of Denham Springs officials to talk about adopting the master plan. Again, this was about a $10,000 cost to the city. As Recovery Coordinator Jeanette Clark said, if you don't have a plan, you can't present it to anyone. Nobody's going to take you seriously. But if you have a plan, maybe you can long-term plan for some of the larger projects or go after some of the smaller ones. There will be a wide range of projects ranging from sidewalks to full-on, as mentioned, the bike boulevard with a wide variety of costs. And they're not entirely sure what that's going to look like just yet. But there will be a priority list, much like with a road program. And there will be a list of what's available for grants, what's not, and what projects can be piggybacked on with the state or the feds to try to get them done as soon as possible. So again, that is the interconnected city, which is what they are trying to turn Denham Springs into. It is a bicycle and pedestrian master plan. It's going to be about a 1.5 year process just to get that put together, and then it'll take years. That's why the state has called it Move 2042, which, I'm sure you know, is 13 years from now. It's going to take a while to get people on board with the projects, get them funded, get them out as quickly as possible. So will be interesting to see what the final presentation looks like, what priority projects they recommend the city go after, and what priority projects the citizens wanted the most, and then take that all together with what are the state and federal funding availability for all of those projects. Where do they fall in? So it will be interesting to see what kind of approach the city takes once they receive that final map. Once again, my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you joining us for this walkthrough of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. That final version, before the city adopts it, should be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Remember, if you miss these shows, or if you don't, if this is the only podcast you want to listen to, you can always check it out, www.livingstonparishnews.com/podcast. If you're interested in anything else, any other podcast, I recommend you get a podcast platform, and we are on all of those. We're on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, all those things. You can check us out there. Next week, I'm going to be coming at you with some school funding questions. A lot of people have interest in that. How is the schools funded? How are these tax dollars spent? We're going to be talking to you about that next week. So please join us then. One last time, McHugh David checking out for the week. Hope you have a great weekend.